The scent of gardenias hung in the air, so thick and sweet it was almost a taste. I stood before the floor-length mirror, a woman of 62 years, draped in silk the color of old parchment. Clara. My name is Clara. Outside the open window, the murmur of 300 guests finding their seats in the sun-dappled pavilion was a distant ocean. It was a sound I had dreamed of for 14 years, the hum of life, of celebration, of a second chance. Every ivory-draped chair, every tower of white roses and eucalyptus, every note from the waiting string quartet had been paid for with more than money. It was paid for with years of silence, with nights where the only sound was the clock ticking in an empty house, with the careful accumulation of pennies saved from grocery budgets and foregone comforts. This day was my phoenix moment, rising from the ashes of quiet loneliness, and he was out there, Leo, my Leo, not a prince from a fairy tale, but a man with silver in his hair and the gentle, sure hands of a bookbinder. His eyes, the soft gray of a dove's wing, held a quiet knowing that soothed my perpetually humming nerves. When he looked at me, I didn't feel like a widow, or a mother, or a woman past her prime. I felt seen. That was his magic. He lived simply, in an apartment that smelled of leather, glue, and old paper, and drove a sedan with a friendly rattle, but he offered a wealth no bank could hold. His full, undivided attention. His laughter was a low, warm rumble. His patience was infinite. In 6 months, he had rebuilt my belief in joy, plank by careful plank. Then, the first splinter. It wasn't a word, but a sound, a laugh. It was sharp, glassy, and viciously out of place, slicing through the gentle prelude of a Vivaldi piece. It came from the second row. My eyes, against my will, found the source. My son Nathan was leaning into his wife, Sloane, his shoulders shaking with mirth. At 40, he was a sculpture of modern success, the bespoke suit that hugged his frame like a second skin, the watch whose face glittered with a cold, mechanical arrogance. Next to him, Sloane was a splash of venom in a too-tight crimson dress. Her smile was a sleek, satisfied curve. Surrounding them was her tribe, the carvers, a constellation of sleek hair, judgmental eyeglasses, and jewelry that seemed less for adornment and more for armor. Her mother, Patricia, a woman who wore her wealth like a weapon, whispered behind a hand dripping with rings. Another coordinated titter rippled through them, a wave of cruel amusement aimed at the altar. A hot flush crawled up my neck. I gripped my bouquet of peonies and sage so tightly the stems protested. Asterisk, don't look. Don't give them the satisfaction. Asterisk, I fixed my gaze on the wooden arbor, woven with jasmine, where Reverend Harris stood, a benign smile on his face. A warm, steady pressure enveloped my hand. Leo's fingers, calloused and strong, laced through mine. He didn't turn his head, didn't acknowledge the discord. He simply squeezed, a silent Morse code that said, asterisk, I am here. This is ours. Asterisk. His calm was a rock in the suddenly churning sea of my anxiety. I clung to it, but the murmurs from the Carver contingent grew bolder, a malignant commentary track to the sacred words. Are those actual leather shoes? A male voice, likely Sloane's brother, stage whispered. They look like they marched here from the Great Depression. A suppressed snort. And the suit. I think my dry cleaner has a more fashionable silhouette. The words were tiny daggers, each one pricking the beautiful bubble of the day. Leo remained immovable, his profile serene, as if he heard only the birdsong and the minister's voice. His dignity was a shield, and he held it over both of us. Then came our vows. Leo turned to face me, fully. The world narrowed to his face, to the gentle crinkles at the corners of his eyes. When he spoke, his voice, usually so soft, found a resonant depth that filled the pavilion and echoed in the hollow of my chest. Clara, he began, and my name in his mouth sounded like a prayer. For most of my life, I believed my best story had already been written and closed. Then I met you. You walked into my quiet world with your kindness and your steadfast heart. And you began a new, beautiful chapter I never dared to hope for. I don't have empires or fortunes to lay at your feet. All I have is this repaired heart, which you hold in your hands, and a promise to listen, to cherish, to build a peaceful haven with you every single day I am granted. Tears, hot and unresisted, blurred my vision. This was it. This was the profound, unadorned truth I had waited for. A soft, collective sigh of appreciation rustled through the gathered friends and family who knew my journey. And then, Nathan stood up. The scrape of his chair was a gunshot in the holy silence. He was unsteady, a glass of amber liquid clutched in his hand, his face flushed with more than just sun. "Oh, for God's sake, mother," his voice boomed, rich with contempt and theatrical exasperation. "Can you hear this? It's a parody." The quartet trailed off into dissonance. 300 heads turned as one. Reverend Harris's smile vanished, replaced by stunned concern. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. "Nathan, please," I whispered, the plea a broken thing. "No, it's time for a reality check." He took 3 deliberate steps into the center aisle, a prosecutor addressing a jury. "You worked, Dad worked. He left you secure. And this is your grand finale, marrying some impoverished librarian who probably thinks your house is his retirement plan." He spat the word librarian as if it were a contagion. Sloane rose beside him, a panther uncoiling. She slipped her arm through his, her smile widening. "He's trying to protect you, Clara. Let's call it what it is." She paused, her eyes sweeping over Leo with undisguised revulsion. "That's not a stepfather." To breathe, the word hung in the air for a horrific second, then the Carver clan erupted. It wasn't just laughter. It was a roaring, knee-slapping, tear-wiping convulsion of ridicule. Phones were raised like periscopes, capturing our humiliation for later dissection. Patricia Carver dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, overcome by the hilarity. Roland, Sloane's father, guffawed, his large face turning pale. We were there, tragicomic interlude, a live soap opera they'd paid for with their presence, and something in the core of my binge of them built from decades of deference, of smoothing things over, of swallowing disappointment. It wasn't a crack, it was a cataclysm, a fury, white-hot and purer than any emotion I'd ever felt, erupted from a place so deep I didn't know I possessed it. It was molten, it was righteous, and it was mine. I gently, deliberately, pulled my hand from Leo's. The look he gave me wasn't of shock or plea. It was one of profound, heartbreaking calm. A deep sadness resided there, but also a fierce, unwavering pride. It was the look of a man watching someone he loved finally find their voice, no matter how painful the song. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. I walked toward my son. The sound of my heels on the flagstone aisle was a metronome counting down to an end, or a beginning. The silence in the pavilion was absolute, a held breath. "You're right, Nathan," I said. My voice sounded foreign low, resonant, stripped of all tremor. "Someone absolutely must tell the truth here. You could have heard a pedal drop. The truth," I continued, the words forming from the raw material of a lifetime, "is that I spent 38 years married to your father, 38 years of waking in the dark to clean other people's offices so you could have the right calculator for school, 38 years of stitching my own clothes and calling it fashion so your uniform could be brand new, 38 years of making my world small so yours could feel limitless." My voice hitched, but I pressed on. The floodgates opened. When he died, he left me a quiet house and a silence so profound it echoed in my bones. Do you know how many of those echoes were unanswered phone calls to you? How many holidays I spent with the TV4 company because your new family had more glamorous plans? Nathan's smirk faltered. A flicker of the boy I knew confused, defensive crossed his face. "Mother, you're deliberately making a scene." A scene. The laugh that tore from me was short, sharp, and tasted of gall. A scene is sitting alone in a hospital waiting room, scared, after a biopsy, because you were in a can't-miss meeting. A scene is your own son treating a request for a cup of coffee like a burdensome imposition. That's the scene of my life for the last decade. A murmur, like wind through wheat, swept the audience. I saw heads nodding, eyes softening with pity for me and hardening with disdain toward Nathan. My dearest friend, Marjorie, a robust woman with kind eyes now swimming in tears, pressed a clenched fist to her mouth. Sloane slithered forward, her perfume a clash of tuberose and entitlement. "Spare us the dramatic monologue, Clara. No one is obligated to be your emotional support animal. Nathan has a demanding life, a real life." "I never asked for an animal," I fired back, the heat in my voice scalding. "I asked for a son. I asked for the man whose skinned knees I kissed, not a stranger who views me as a mildly embarrassing line item. And now," I said, turning my whole body to face Nathan, my heart a wild drum against my ribs, "when I have finally found a sliver of light, a man who looks at me and sees a future, not a financial statement, you come here to extinguish it. You orchestrate this grotesque public shaming of the one good thing I've fought for, because he's a parasite." Nathan roared, his finger a rigid accusatory arrow aimed at Leo's heart. "Look at him. He's a penniless, aging nobody. He's a gold digger in thrift store clothing, and you're too desperate to see it. Your father and I built what we had, I roared back, the volume and venom in my own voice shocking me. And since when did you become its fierce guardian? When the pipes burst and I asked for a loan, you presented me with a contract more rigid than any bank's. You charged your own mother interest, Nathan. You monetized my panic. The crowd's murmur grew louder, more indignant. Roland Carver heaved himself up, a mountain of seersucker and indignation. Your boy is trying to save you from your own foolishness, woman. Show some gratitude for the tough love. Tough love. I pivoted to him, my gaze locking onto his piggy, dismissive eyes. Is that what you call the gift of a luxury cruise you generously gave Nathan and Sloane, which I later found out was charged to a credit card in my name? Is that the Carver family values theft and condescension? Patricia gasped, her jewelry rattling like a snake's warning. How dare you? We took that boy in when he had nothing. He had a mother. I screamed, the last vestige of restraint vaporizing. He had a mother who loved him, and you turned him into this replica of your own hollow vanity. The air crackled with fury and shock. I was trembling, but it was with power, not fear. I turned my back on them, on all of them, and walked to Leo. I took his beloved, weathered face in my hands. His eyes held galaxies of sorrow and an unshakable love. Are you sure? I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of it all. This ugliness, this is my blood. He smiled then, a small, tender curve that held the wisdom of ages. Clara, my heart, I have never been more certain of anything, and you are right. There are souls here who have stained this space. They do not deserve to witness what comes next. I turned to face the assembly. I drew myself up to my full height, the silk of my dress whispering of a strength I'd forgotten I owned. Nathan, Sloane, all of you, Carvers, get out. Leave my wedding. This moment is not for you. The silence was so profound it had a physical weight. Nathan's face underwent a grotesque transformation from arrogance to disbelief to seething, humiliated rage. You're evicting us. I am. You have 5 minutes to gather your malice and go, or I will have security make a spectacle that even you will find excessive. Sloane emitted a shrill, hyena-like laugh. You're choosing this street sweeper over your own flesh and blood. You're insane. He is my family, I said, each word a chip of ice. You are a disease I am curing myself of. Now, get out. What followed was a symphony of outrage. Chairs screeched, designer handbags were snatched, insults hissed like steam. You'll die a bitter, lonely hag. Roland promised to blacken my name in every country club in the state. Patricia lamented the waste of a perfectly good hat. Nathan, the last to leave, stopped at the heavy oak door at the rear of the pavilion. He turned, and the look on his face was one of such pure, venomous betrayal it stole the air from my lungs. Do this, he said, his voice low and trembling with hate, and you will never see Oliver or Lily again. I will make sure of it. You are dead to them. The names of my grandchildren, my 6-year-old sunshine boy and my 4-year-old fairy girl, were twin spears through my heart. The pain was instant, visceral, a nausea of loss. I saw their faces, their trusting eyes, and my resolve wavered on a precipice. I met his gaze across the gulf of ruined chairs and shattered expectations. My soul screamed in agony, but something deeper, a foundational truth, held me firm. If my love for them is held hostage by my tolerance for your cruelty, I said, the words ash in my mouth, then that is a tragedy you have authored, not me. He left. The door thudded shut with a finality that echoed in the chamber of my ribs. The beautiful pavilion, once a scene of hope, now felt like a battlefield after the war. The shaking began in my hands, a fine tremor that traveled up my arms and seized my legs. A sob, raw and animal, erupted from my throat. I had done it. I had cast out my only child. I had chosen myself, and the cost was a piece of my own heart, severed and bleeding. Then, Leo's arms were around me. He didn't speak. He simply held me as I fractured, his body a solid wall against my collapse, his chin resting on my head. He absorbed the tremors, the tears that soaked into his simple, good suit. My brave, brave love, he murmured into my hair, his voice a rumble against my ear. My magnificent blindness, it's done. You are free. When the storm within me subsided to ragged hiccups, he guided me to a stone bench nestled beside the arbor. The remaining guests, my true friends, my kind neighbors, the people who had shared casseroles and condolences years ago sat, in a hushed, respectful circle of solidarity. Marjorie appeared with a glass of water, her own face streaked with tears. She squeezed my shoulder, a wordless communication of awe and support. Leo knelt before me on the flagstones, taking both my cold hands in his warm, steady grasp. He looked up into my ravaged face, and his eyes held not pity, but a profound, almost sorrowful intensity. "Clara," he began, his voice so soft it was almost part of the garden breeze. "What I must tell you now, I have carried it as both a burden and a shield. I was a coward, terrified that the truth would shatter the most real, fragile beauty I had ever been given. A new dread, cold and slick, coiled in my gut. Please, no, not another betrayal. Not from him. Leo, what is it?" My voice was a thread. He took a deep, fortifying breath, as if about to dive into deep, cold water. "My darling, I am not a poor man. I am, in fact, a billionaire." The words bounced off my consciousness, meaningless as a forgotten nursery rhyme. I stared blankly. Marjorie, still hovering, let out a small, choked sound. "My net worth, it is approximately $3 billion. Billion." The word finally connected, detonating in my mind. The world did not just tilt, it inverted. The flowers, the faces, Leo's earnest expression all swirled into a pointillist nightmare. This man who mended torn pages for a living, who lived in a book-crammed walk-up, who loved simple diner breakfasts. "A billionaire, your apartment," I stammered, my mind scrambling for anchor points. "Your car, your clothes, a conscious, deliberate choice," he said, his thumbs stroking my knuckles with infinite tenderness. "After my Isabella died 8 years ago, cancer, swift and merciless, the world became a gilded cage. The friends were vultures, the women were sirens, singing only to my bank account. The family I had left saw me as a lottery ticket. I saw the corrupting power of it, how it twisted every genuine connection. So, I walked away. I placed my holdings, Sterling Global Holdings, in the hands of a brilliant, ethical few, and I became Leo. Just Leo, the bookbinder. I wanted to find, if it existed at all, a love that was blind to everything but the spirit, a love that saw the man, not the monument. His eyes searched mine, pleading for understanding. And I found it. I found you. You brought me chicken soup when I voiced a scratch in my throat. You fell asleep on my sofa watching old movies. You loved me when you believed my greatest treasure was a first edition Robert Frost I'd rescued from a dumpster. Tears were a constant river now, but of a different kind, a confusing deluge of shock, awe, and a dawning, horrifying comprehension. "Why now?" I breathed. "Why here? After that," he glanced toward the door, his expression turning to flint. "Because I needed you to see them. I needed you to see their true, unfiltered faces, unaltered by the distorting lens of wealth. Your choice today, Clarier, stunning, brave, heartbreaking choice, had to be for us, for you and for me. It couldn't be a reaction to a revelation. It had to be a stand taken in the dark, so its purity could never be questioned." He paused, his voice dropping further. "The $5,000 loan from Nathan, I had it repaid in full, anonymously, months ago. I needed to know if he would tell you, if he would do the honest thing." He didn't need to finish. The memory of Nathan just last week, reminding me of the outstanding balance, was a fresh slap. My son had been scheming for thousands while he mocked a man for whom such a sum was less than a rounding error. The grotesque irony was a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless with a pain that was almost laughter. "What?" I swallowed, the world spinning. "What happens now?" "Now," Leo said, rising and gently pulling me to my feet. "If you will still have this complicated secret-keeping fool, we get married, with every card on the table, and no shadows between us." He turned to Reverend Harris, who had been witnessing this human drama with the rapt attention of a scholar. "Reverend, if you'd be so kind, let's finish binding this story together." The ceremony that resumed was unlike any other. The same words were spoken, but they were infused now with seismic truth, with the weight of conscious, eyes-wide-open choice. When he slid the ring onto my finger, it felt like a covenant, not just of love, but of shared, formidable truth. When he kissed me, the applause that erupted was a thunderclap of catharsis, a collective release of breath held too long. The reception was transformed. The absence of the Carver poison allowed a genuine, joyous warmth to flood the space. People danced with abandon, laughed with relief, toasted not just to our union, but to resilience. Later, Leo stood to speak. He told them everything: his real name, Leonard Sterling, his past, his self-imposed exile, his search for authenticity. And I found it, he declared, his hand clasping mine on the table, not in a boardroom, but in a community garden. I found it in a woman with the soul of a poet and the courage of a general. She defended not a fortune, but a feeling, and that feeling is the only wealth I will ever need. That night, in a serene hotel suite that seemed to float above the city lights, I lay awake long after Leonard Leo, he would always be Leo to me, had fallen into an exhausted, peaceful sleep. The events of the day played on a relentless loop, the cruel laughter, the searing fury, the world-altering revelation, the defiant joy, and underneath it all, a constant, aching throb, the void, where Nathan, Oliver, and Lily resided. The weeks that followed were a disorienting whirlwind. Leo, with infinite patience, began to guide me through the looking glass. There were introductions to his lawyer, Alistair Reed, a man of quiet authority and sharp intellect who regarded me with immediate, respectful warmth. There were tours of the Sterling Foundation headquarters, where I saw not cold corporate philanthropy, but passionate projects funding literacy programs in Appalachia and preserving indigenous languages. I walked the hushed, sun-drenched ward of the hospital wing, named for Isabella, dedicated to palliative care and dignity in final days. The scale of his wealth remained an abstract, dizzying number, but its application was deeply, movingly human. The billionaire and the bookbinder were, I saw, the same man, one who believed in preserving stories, in building shelters for the human spirit. Through Alistair, we received discreet updates on Nathan's precipitous fall. The debts were mountainous, a tangled web of high-risk investments, maxed-out luxury credit cards, and loans from entities with ominous, nondescript names. The threats from creditors were not idle. Sloane, sensing the sinking ship, had fled to her parents' mansion, taking Oliver and Lily with her. Each piece of news was a physical wound. My brave, foolish, cruel boy was drowning in the sea of his own making. Leo never pressed, never offered an "I told you so." He simply held me on the nights when the worry and grief became a suffocating blanket. "The heart," he said once, his voice gentle in the darkness, "is not a ledger. It doesn't have columns for credits and debits. It's a vast, wild landscape that can feel a desert's loneliness and a forest's joy all in the same moment. You are allowed to feel it all." Clara. One afternoon, as we walked along the windswept beach near the new, cozy cottage he'd bought for us, not a mansion, but a haven filled with books and lights, because he'd remembered every detail of my dream home, I made the hardest decision. "Don't help him," I said, the salt wind whipping the words from my lips. "Not financially, not yet." Leo stopped, searching my face. "Are you certain?" "He needs to hit the bottom," I said, my voice trembling with the effort of holding firm against every maternal instinct screaming to rescue. "He needs to know what nothing feels like in his bones, so he can learn what someone truly means. He needs to understand that the value he mocked is the only thing that can't be repaid." It was an agony. Alistair ensured Nathan had access to legal aid and, through invisible channels, that his physical safety was monitored. But the financial consequences, the humiliation, the loss, those were his to navigate. 2 months after the wedding, a parcel arrived, forwarded by Alistair. It was a simple bulk rate envelope. Inside were 10 pages of cheap, lined paper, filled with Nathan's frantic, sprawling script. It was not an excuse. It was a confession. He wrote of the hollow pit of envy he felt around the Carvers, of the sick pride he took in their approval when they mocked me, of how money had become his only currency of self. He described the man he'd become, hollow shell plated in gold leaf. He apologized, not for the consequences, but for the profound, personal failure. He did not ask for a single thing. I took the pages to the cliff's edge, behind our cottage, and cried until my throat was raw. Leo sat beside me in silent solidarity, a steady presence in the face of my storm. That evening, I sent a text to the new, bare-bones number Alistair had provided Nathan. Just 3 words. "I am here." Our first call was a landscape of cavernous silences, of sentences begun and abandoned, of tears we could both hear but not acknowledge. But we persisted. Every Sunday, for 30 minutes, we talked about his new job installing hardwood floors, the aching muscles, the satisfaction of a straight line. We talked about the tiny, spotless studio he rented. He mentioned his therapist, a no-nonsense woman who asked hard questions. He never, not once, mentioned Leo's money. He asked about my garden. He asked, his voice small and shattered, if I thought Oliver and Lily would forget my face. The turning point came when Alistair, with a rare smile, placed a money order on my desk. It was for $5,000. Nathan had worked months of overtime, forsaken every comfort, to gather it. The note attached, in his now neater handwriting, read, "For my mother's freedom, the first of many debts I hope to repay." That was the day I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that my son was not lost. He was buried, but he was digging his way out. I reached out to Sloane. It was a call of icy civility. She agreed, with palpable resentment, to 1 supervised hour per week with the children at a public park. She made it clear it was a concession to avoid looking unreasonable, not an olive branch. I didn't care. The first time I knelt on the grass and Lily launched herself into my arms, her familiar weight and scent of baby shampoo unleashing a torrent of quiet tears. The first time Oliver, after 30 minutes of wary observation, sidled up and silently slipped his hand into mine. These moments were a balm, a reconnection of a severed lifeline. Leo was a wonder with them, building elaborate fairy tale castles in the sandbox, his billionaire hands growing grubby with soil, proving that true magic needs no price tag. A year to the day after the wedding that almost wasn't, Leonard and I renewed our vows in the garden of our seaside cottage. It was just Marjorie, Alistair and his wife, a few cherished friends, Nathan, Oliver, and Lily. The jasmine on the arbor was in bloom again. Nathan, Leonard, dressed in a simple but crisp white shirt, stood before Leo as the sun began to dip, painting the sky in watercolor hues. "Mr. Stir Leo," he began, his voice thick. "I have spent this year trying to find words that aren't inadequate." Leo extended his hand, not in formal greeting, but in an offer of pull. "Nathan, you're here. That's the only word that matters tonight." That night, as I listened to the eternal rhythm of the ocean sighing against the shore, Leo asleep beside me, his breath a soft counterpoint to the waves, I felt a peace that was not the absence of pain, but the presence of something greater. My life had been cracked open by loss, by cruelty, by a fortune beyond imagining. But from those fractures had come a profound light, a love tested in fire and found unbreakable, a son, broken and slowly reassembling himself into a better man, the small, warm hands of my grandchildren once again in mine, and a purpose. With Leo's steadfast support, I had launched the Second Chapter Foundation, offering microloans, career counseling, and community to women over 55 starting anew. The story that began with a public shaming had woven itself into a quiet epic of private courage, painful redemption, and a love that was, finally, about nothing more and nothing less than two souls who had chosen each other, before and after everything. And as the moon painted a silver path on the dark water, I understood. This wasn't just a happy ending. It was a rich, complex, and deeply satisfying continuation. And that was the only kind of story worth living.